Hello everyone, welcome once again to Midweek Encouragement. It is great to have you with us tonight. I'm Ronald Rice, your host tonight, and we're so thankful you're here. Please make sure you're putting those good positive emojis down below and all the good comments. Appreciate all the comments that you're doing. Thank you for every one of them. Please keep that going and make a lot of comments. It's totally fine. If you got questions, make sure you message me with those questions. Really appreciate it, and I really enjoy this time that we have together every Wednesday night or whenever you happen to be watching this particular video. Thank you again. I'd like to see you some Thursday night at 7 or Sunday morning at 11 at the Pentecostals of Salt Lake if you happen to be in the area, or you're part of our church family, of course. Looking forward to that time that we have together every single week. We have been talking about the Transfiguration, and we've been working through some of that in various ways. And if you'll remember, you've got Jesus going up on the mountain to pray. Peter, James, and John are taken with him up on that mountain, and while they're there, it seems like maybe they got sleepy or they fell asleep, and they wake up and there's Jesus, and he's brighter than anything they've ever seen, and it's not so much his clothes, it's just he's brilliant. It's the glory shining through, and with him is Moses and Elijah. It is important to understand you got Moses and Elijah with Jesus, and Jesus is the new Moses. And John the Baptist is now Elijah. And in the scheme of things, the new Elijah, of course, prepared the way for the new Moses. Jesus, to be clear, is not just another Moses. He replaced Moses and is so much more than what Moses was. So Luke gives us a little report about what they talked about. He wrote that they spoke of the coming death of Jesus in Jerusalem. So here we are at the very apex of his earthly glory. And you could perhaps argue that it was the pinnacle of his ministry at this point. They could have been talking about any number of things. Maybe it was the time that Jesus has on earth. It could have been anything related to his ministry. It could have been anything, really. But what did they talk about? They talked about death, of all things. So the death of Jesus was not only weighing on Jesus, but was of enough importance that it was noteworthy. And in this moment, it was the topic of discussion with these two Old Testament heavyweights. It was the subject of conversation between these giants. His death, of course, meant life for all of us. And his death obviously is a critical part of the story. Now, the different translations say that he was talking of his decease or his departure. You can call it anything you want, but in the context of what is happening, and even the verbiage used in the original Greek, they're talking about his exodus. Again, a key part of all of this. There's Moses, and they're talking about the exodus of Jesus. There was a whole book called Exodus, if you'll remember. This guy named Moses is the one who led millions of people out of bondage and into their land of promise. So they're having this conversation. Speaking of that, is your prayer time a time of conversation with the Lord? Or is it a practice? Or is it just an effort to get approval? And I'm saying that because these are things that I at times struggle with as well. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? At any rate, you've got Moses and Elijah and Jesus all having a conversation. So they're talking about the Exodus Jesus was about to lead in Jerusalem. So Jesus was going to lead any who would want to so follow him out of the bondage of sin and into the promised land of liberty and reconciliation with God in the kingdom of God. But how do we cross the Red Sea in this analogy? Well, we do that through baptism in his name. We are, and the New Testament is very clear, we are buried with him in baptism. So what Israel did in following Moses through the Red Sea or through the water is a type or an example of what we do on our way to Christ. They were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. We are baptized into Christ. And this is expressed so many different ways in Scripture. You really have to try in order to miss that entire comparison. It's one of those things you really can't argue against. So Peter, James, and John, often called the inner circle, had been sleepy. One gospel says that they had to come fully awake, so to speak, in this particular case. I wonder, it makes me wonder, if Jesus really liked to pray and often just prayed a long time, and maybe he liked to pray so long that the disciples who were nearby often fell asleep while Jesus was praying. I don't know. It's a thought. It might also be nighttime at this point. It might be the time when they normally are asleep. But in any case, the three of them come fully awake, and when they do, they see Jesus and his two visitors. Peter maybe still trying to come to himself, maybe still half asleep. He has this thought, Master, it's good for us to be here. I don't know how you are when you wake up in the morning. It takes me a little bit to get some of the cobwebs swept out. And maybe that's how Peter was. Maybe he's just trying to make sense of everything he's seeing, and he's just doing what he does. He talks and doesn't think through sometimes everything he's talking about. He said, I have this idea. Hey, let me help you out, Jesus. Let's improve on this incredibly glorious moment. We can build 3 tabernacles or tents, or I don't know. I think of it as maybe 3 shrines, I guess. Something there to mark the moment and to have something for each of them. I'm not suggesting, nor do I think he was suggesting, that they worship all 3 of these individuals, obviously. In any case, Peter wanted this to have a more permanent and lasting memorial so that everyone could come to this mountain and remember this moment. So Peter said this, but it's clear from the text, he didn't really know what to say. And partly because he was, and we again get this from the text, he was frightened in the moment. This was quite a moment. And even while he's saying these things, as we're reading through, a cloud comes in, moves in, and overshadows all of them. And the truth is, there was no need to really memorialize this moment, because this moment was not about the now, the particular moment. It was really all about the future. All 3 of these disciples have a need to see this. This was absolutely imperative for them to witness. And in a little while down the road, they're going to need to remember this moment. And even with that, when it came time for Jesus to suffer, they all still hit rock bottom. Even when they should have been remembering all of these things. They had a moment down the road a bit when even these 3 lost all hope. So the cloud comes in, envelops them, and it further frightened the 3 of them. And it was already quite overwhelming. I mean, they're seeing these two giants from the Old Testament and Jesus glorified, and now the cloud comes and descends on them and just completely envelops them. Now, this is also kind of important. I mean, remember that Moses and Israel were led by a cloud by day and a fire by night. And here is both Moses and a cloud. Also, when Moses, having led Israel from Egypt all the way back to where he had that burning bush encounter, he went up on Mount Sinai, and when he did, the mountain was covered in a cloud, and there was smoke and lightning, and the people of Israel were terrified. Well, Peter, James, and John are terrified. And this is all like the stuff they had learned about from the book of Exodus. And they got to be thinking, what's happening? Is this the judgment of God? What's going on here? And then to add to the surreal atmosphere, a voice comes out of the cloud and says, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." And if you'll notice in the text, there's an exclamation point. It's emphasized. Don't get distracted by those who talk about Jesus. I want you to know how to get a hold of Jesus for yourself. Now, it's easy, especially in a church environment, and you'll hear where I'm going here in a minute. But it's easy to get close and to depend on someone who gets close to and hears from God. You want to get close to that person because they can have a word from God. They hear from God. And honestly, some people like to be thought of that way. They like to be the super spiritual one in the crowd. And there are people even who are not wholly submitted to God, but still want others to think of them as some sort of spiritual leader. And we don't need that. You don't need that. What that individual really needs is to be submitted to God and to be led themselves. And the truth is that even with those who are genuinely close to Jesus, I mean, you can hang out with them all you want, and you may even learn a few things. But that doesn't get you any closer to Jesus just because you're hanging out with people who are close to Jesus. You see, you have to do that for yourself. You have to get that relationship with Him and get close to Him yourself. You can't depend on someone else. God reveals things too prized to talk about. Let's take a quick look at Matthew 17. Matthew 17, and I want to go here because I like this particular rendition of what happens afterward a little better. It gives us a little more details and information. So if you would, I want you to go to Matthew 17, and we're going to begin working on verses 6 through 9. 17, 6 through 9. Go ahead and read along with me. "And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their faces and were greatly afraid," which we've just covered. "But Jesus came and touched them and said, 'Arise, and do not be afraid.' When they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus only. Now as they came down from the mountain, Jesus commanded them, saying, 'Tell the vision to no one until the Son of Man is risen from the dead.'" Now, let's take this piece at a time and unpack it. And maybe this will resonate with some of you. You've got the three inner circle, Peter, James, and John. They're fully awake now. They are aware, fully aware of what they have just witnessed. They had fallen to the ground in terror, not knowing what was about to happen or what was going on. And it's in that moment of abject terror that Jesus comes to them and comforts them, physically touches them, comforts them physically and emotionally. And apparently Jesus is back to His normal self, his compassionate and kind self, responding to them like one human would respond to another human concerned about these followers of his. So they hear, they sense, they feel, and they look up, and the only one they see now is Jesus. As mighty as God is, as amazing and powerful and holy as He is, when we think of those attributes and how God is in that way, just how lofty and majestic He is, that can really sometimes be a bit of a disservice to us. And I'm not saying He's not those things, He is. But when you worship Him and you're imagining God high and lifted up and grand beyond anyone's imagination, it's easy to see Him as being far off and even aloof and disconnected from human affairs. But it is He who comes to me and comforts me when I am in the depths of despair, when I am terrified and half out of my mind. In that kind of a moment, Jesus will come to you. And that's when He'll comfort you, and He'll tell you, arise, and don't be afraid. I've got this. Now, He is certainly majestic. He is high and lifted up. But He is also right here working in us and with us and through us. He is not disconnected and disengaged from the affairs of humans. He is involved, and He cares for each and every one of us, and He cares deeply, and He cares for His body corporately as well. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why we can boldly approach His throne. He knows what you've been through. He's been there. He's already conquered it. And He still has grace for you in your time of great need. Now, we cannot just think of Him as a far-off, mighty, all-powerful God. Even though He is, we have to also realize that as great and awesome as He is, He's also right here in your moment when you need Him. When you've got nowhere else to turn and you just need Him, He is there. Now, you have close friends, maybe your spouse, people with whom you've experienced some very impacting moments with. There are some things that you have been through together. Maybe there are moments of great celebration. There are also moments of tremendous tragedy. And there are just some things that you experience that, well, you just don't share them with other people outside of those who were with you in those highly emotionally charged moments. These are cherished moments. They're in your memory. You have those moments seared in your memory, and they're with certain people. And when you have a close relationship with God, you just don't tell everything that you've experienced with Him. You just don't. There are some things that you experience and that you can tell in a certain time. It's all about timing. And yet there are other things that are just for you and God that you would never tell. And there's things you experience with human beings like that, and this is the analogy. When we experience those things with human beings, we don't tell others about it. We can share among ourselves and remember the moment because nobody else would really understand. Except if you were in that moment. It's the same thing with God. And what I'm hoping for here is to really just kind of whet your appetite for that kind of relationship with God. Now, I'm thrilled that you have a relationship of some kind with PSL, and perhaps you have a relationship with me as well. But I want you to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. See, that relationship will last even if you and I are no longer connected, or you're no longer connected to PSL, that relationship with God is going to last for eternity. Yes, you need connections with the body. Don't misunderstand me. You need a connection with the people of God. You need that. I need that. But we must have a close and lasting relationship with Jesus. And I hope you're looking for that and searching and moving in that regard. Let's get back to our story here. When Jesus told these three not to tell anyone, do you realize that also meant they were not to tell the other disciples as well? See, this one was a matter of timing. They were to hold this experience and not tell anyone until Jesus was risen from the dead. And it seems that they got this part about don't talk about this, but they did not get the part about rising from the dead. That still didn't connect. That just, it didn't sink in. It didn't register with them. Like when he's talking about his suffering or his death, they just like, they can't be. And I don't, they couldn't get it. They're still doubting. They're still questioning about this whole rising from the dead and what that could possibly mean. They couldn't see it. And I wonder at this point how anything could be in question after what they've just witnessed. Why would anything be outside of the realm of possibility? Let's keep reading. We've got to keep moving here. Chapter 17 of Matthew, let's read verses 10 through 13. 10 through 13. And his disciples asked him, saying, "Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Indeed, Elijah is coming first and will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah has come already, and they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he spoke to them of John the Baptist. All right. They've just seen Elijah. The Elijah, the first Elijah. But the question they have is, why is Elijah in all of this? I mean, he didn't write any great books, right? Look, I could see Isaiah maybe. I mean, a bestseller, you might say. He wrote of the coming of Messiah. He wrote extensively about Messiah. But no, it was Elijah. What did Elijah prophesy? Well, Elijah was a prophet in action. He prophesied with his miracles. His miracles told of the coming Messiah. And yet in a somewhat obscure passage in the Old Testament, we find that a messenger in the spirit of Elijah was to come first before Messiah. And he would turn the hearts of the children to the parents to their children, New Testament says he would turn the fools to the wise. And that's the New Testament rendition. In any case, they're wondering about Elijah. Why Elijah? And Jesus, in his answer, said Elijah is coming and first will restore all things. But I say to you that Elijah's come already. And they didn't know him, but did whatever they wished. Now, what happened to the original Elijah? They didn't get to do to him whatever they wished. You've got the prophets of Baal, who wanted him killed. And yet Elijah had hundreds of the prophets of Baal killed. And then Jezebel's after him. And where did Elijah go when they were all after him and there's a price on his head? He goes to the mountain, not a mountain. He goes to which mountain? He goes to the mountain of God. The same mountain where Moses met with God. Are you seeing the tie-ins here? I hope you are. And it was there that Elijah heard God, but he heard him in a still small voice. It wasn't in the great glorious splendor perhaps like Moses saw. It was also there that Elijah got instructions to go anoint his successor, Elisha. Go anoint Jehu, and on to complete what it was that God wanted him to do. But they did not kill Elijah. Now the second Elijah, him they killed. That was, of course, John the Baptist. And they did to him whatever they wanted. They cut off his head. But why would Jesus bring all this up? Well, he brought it up to say what the next line was. He says, likewise, in the same way, the Son of Man is also about to suffer at their hands. So Jesus is telling them that in the same way that they did what they wanted to with John the Baptist, they're going to do the same with him. He's going to suffer at their hands. And he brings it right back to the issue that they're having a hard time with. He's going to suffer at the hands of the Jews who wanted him dead. So the disciples, then they said, understood what he was talking about when he's talking about John the Baptist. And these kind of things really give me some hope. Why? Because they didn't get it. They still don't get the whole part about the death of Jesus. All they got was the John the Baptist part. And Jesus still didn't throw them out and start over with a new group. So if you haven't got it yet, or if you've missed it, or you're struggling with truly seeing Jesus, there is still hope. Jesus doesn't just cast aside those who are struggling with these things. Regardless of how many examples he's given and lessons he's taught, some might still be seeing people like trees walking, like the blind man earlier, but Jesus is going to go teach it again and again and again, as many times as it takes until we get it. He wants you to be able to see and comprehend. And the disciples had to go through a few things in order to see. Sometime back, some children and their parent in our neighborhood were all in our backyard. And one of the little girls grabbed my hand and took me on a tour of ours in our neighbor's backyard. And she was pointing out things and asking me what they were and questioning me. And as she was pointing them, I'm trying to describe to her what she wanted me to see to make sure I was describing exactly what she was looking at. But there's one point where I'm looking and she's telling me and I'm not getting it. I'm not finding the right thing. And because there was a number of things in that general direction. And after several tries, she finally became exasperated and said, "No, look through my eyes. Look through my eyes." And I want you to know tonight that Jesus wants us to see what he's doing through his eyes. Thank you for joining tonight. We've wrapped up open, and I appreciate you joining in through this whole process. I hope you're learning. I hope you're grasping some things, but if not, just keep watching, keep listening. It'll hit you. You'll get there. All of this is going to happen, and you'll come around a little at a time maybe, but it'll happen. Appreciate you joining in on this journey. You're precious to me, and you're important to me and my family and to all of the PSL family. We're grateful for you joining in tonight. Make sure you continue to do what you're doing and to continue to grow. Do your devotions, do your prayer time. Keep growing, keep learning. Keep doing all those things. In the meanwhile, tune in again next week for Midweek Encouragement, Wednesday nights at 7:30 on whether it's YouTube or Facebook, whatever platform you like. And through that time, I want you to love God. I want you to love people as yourself. Fast, pray, give generously. And now you go and make a disciple.